session for district financial, the district financial audit report. It will be presented this evening by Ms. Stephanie Pickering of McGee, Hearn and Pies, who has an audit of the district's financial statements. We'll turn the time over to you.
Well, good evening. Thank you all for having me tonight. I would just spend just a little bit of time walking through the audit report and a couple of the deliverables that you all have. I believe that Marcy would have presented or provided to you a copy of the June 30th, 2021 financial statements, as well as our audit committee letter to you all, and the representation letter, a copy of that the district signs for us. I'm probably, if you have those deliverables in front of you tonight, we're going to kind of walk through the financial statements, but I'm going to do so in kind of the order that it's presented in the audit committee letter. So the information from that letter I will share with you, but it will be kind of referencing the information in the financial statements tonight. So in general, professional standards require communication from our firm to those charged with governance, which is just a fancy way of saying you all as a board of trustees. As an audit firm, and within your financial statements this year, we present you all 3 opinions. The first is our opinion on your financial statements. The second is our opinion on your compliance with laws and regulations. And then the third is the district's compliance with uniform guidance or federal grant revenue. So for the first opinion, this is presented on page 1 of the financial statement. So if you were to flip there in those financial statements in front of you, the wording is very consistent across pretty much any governmental engagement you were to look at. The wording of the opinion is very consistent. What you as a board care about is that very last paragraph on page 1, which is the opinion paragraph. And the words that you're kind of looking for are presented fairly, which we did provide in this opinion, which means an unmodified opinion. It's kind of what you hope. It's the means it was a clean audit with no findings, and we believe that the financial statements are not materially misstated. The next thing in your packet then, kind of beginning on page 4, is management's discussion and analysis. And this is drafted really in conjunction with management, and is a really good synopsis of the financial statement information that's presented, as well as important changes from one fiscal year to the next. If we look at page 6, let me get there myself. This is condensed information for the statement of net position, which statement of net position really kind of synonymous with a balance sheet for those of you that maybe are more familiar with for-profit financial statements. This is condensed information for you. The statement of net position contains all long-term assets and liabilities. So if you're kind of to look at the total district column there and maybe the comparison between the 2 years. So looking at total assets, there was less than 1% change between 2020 and 2021. So in general, your assets stayed very consistent from year to year. If you move down then to the total liabilities, there is a 9.6% decrease, and that was predominantly made up of 2 items. The most predominant was a decrease in your net pension liability. That's your liability through the Wyoming retirement systems. And we'll talk about that a little bit here in a few minutes. The other item then was related to paying off a bus lease early this year as well, under a capital lease. If you just kind of look in comparison of your total assets, 67% of the district's assets are in capital assets, so buildings, equipment, that kind of thing. Turning the page then to page 7, this is condensed information for changes in the district's net position. This is more like your income statement. Again, just a synopsis of information. Your total revenues increased about 5.5% this year, and that predominantly was within the operating grants and contributions line item, second from the top there under program revenues. You did see a relatively flat or consistent year in your total expenses. They did increase about 1.4%, but by and large, they stayed very consistent. That operating grants and contributions is primarily driven by increased grant activity through some of the pandemic assistance that came through the state. So for example, the Esser funds. The fact that the expenses stay flat tells us that your expenses between 2020 and 2021 were the same. You were spending it about the same types of things. You just use different sources of funds this year. So you were able to take advantage of more federal revenue this year to pay for some of those expenses than in previous years, where you might have relied a little bit more on property taxes or other state funding. Following the management's discussion and analysis then is the financial statements. And there are two sets of financial statements that this report presents to you. On page 10 is the statement of net position. And again, that's really long-term focus. That captures capital assets, compensated absences, the net pension liability, all of those liabilities and assets that are really long-term in nature. Following those statements, however, then are more near-term focused financial statements. And they're more closely aligned with maybe what you see in your maybe budget to actual statements that maybe come from Marcy and her team. These are presented on the fund basis and they're really near term. So they do not include those long-term liabilities like the net pension liability, compensated absences, capital assets are not reported on those fund level statements. Instead, they're probably much closer, like I said, aligned to your budget basis. Those are also broken out by fund. So if you wanted to look at just the general fund as an example, or the major maintenance fund, in the back in the combining schedules, all of the other special revenue funds are presented there as well. So rather than having everything rolled up to the district level, those fund level financial statements present a snapshot of each individual fund. After the financial statements then, and I'm not going to spend any more time on those today, as I mentioned, the management's discussion analysis and that condensed information gives you a really good snapshot of the things that changed. And by and large, with the exception of the increased federal revenue, is business as usual for the district, if you will. After that begins the footnotes, and I believe those begin on page 21. Yeah, hot second to turn there as well. And by and large, these stayed very consistent from year to year as well. The district did adopt one new accounting standard this year, and that's GASB statement number 84, which is related to fiduciary activities. And this resulted in a new footnote this year, which is on page 34 of your financial statements. For the most part, what statement 84 did was require the districts to kind of reevaluate what previously were recorded as fiduciary funds to make sure that they still met the definition under the new standard. When the district identified or reviewed their student activities fund and the Boces fund, they identified that those no longer qualified as fiduciary funds under GASB statement 84. So it just required a reclassification of where in the report that information was presented. So it shifted them from fiduciary funds, and this year they're recorded within special revenue funds. No additional changes were needed to the financial statements or how Marcy and her team accounts for that information. Really, it's just a presentation issue only. Beyond that then, looking at the district's significant accounting policies, we did not identify any policies that we thought were controversial or were in emerging areas where there was a lack of authoritative guidance or consensus. So as I stated before, very, very similar to last year. There is one additional footnote that I would like to draw to your attention today, and that is footnote 5, which is related to the Wyoming Retirement System's defined benefit pension plan information, and that begins on page 29. Along with the Wyoming Retirement System's defined pension plan net pension liability, there is kind of an estimation process that goes along with this liability. And that estimation process really lies with Wyoming Retirement Systems, with their board and with their actuaries. So the board, along with their actuaries, make assumption changes. There are changes in the investment portfolio from year to year, and all of those things ultimately affect the total liability for the district, or for the pension plan. The district then records their proportionate share of that liability each year. So that proportionate share can go up or down depending on total people participating in the public employees pension plan, as well as just that overall total pension liability. We do look at how the district then estimates what their portion of that liability is. And as I mentioned, it's really driven by the proportionate share. And that information is provided directly to the district by the Wyoming Retirement System. So in our process of auditing that pension plan, we look at that estimation process, and we have found that to be reasonable. After note 5, there are a few additional notes in there, and then we move into required supplementary information and other supplementary information. Page 5, or page 35, excuse me, is the budget to actual statement for the general fund, followed by some additional information on pages 38 and 39 on the Wyoming Retirement Systems. You can see there, it's kind of reported inception to date. You can see trends in the district's net pension liability, their proportionate share, as well as the total dollar value of their proportionate share, as well as what kind of contributions the district has made over the last several years. Page 44 then, if you skip to page 44, this is the district's schedule of expenditure of federal awards, and it is listed out by program. The district primarily receives a lot of money passed through from the state and the Wyoming Department of Education. And this kind of just, the format of this schedule is driven by federal requirements. And as I said, broken out by federal assistance listing number and then subtotaled there. There was a 64.9% increase this year in expenditures related to federal grants. In general, by and large, it was a very, very clean audit. We posted no audit adjustments. There was only one entry that was provided to us after we began our field work, and that was provided by Marcy and her team. At the end, if you'd like to see what that journal entry was, following the audit committee letter in Appendix A is, or in Appendix B of the representation letter is a copy of that adjusting journal entry. There were a few minor items that we identified during our audit that were related to uncorrected misstatements. These are errors that we found that management elected to not post. They are not material, meaning the exclusion of those items did not materially misstate the financial statements. And so we feel comfortable providing a clean opinion without those items recorded. If you were to want to see those are in Appendix A of the representation letter. Again, very immaterial minor items that we identified. On page 47, then also of the of your statements is our second opinion, which is our compliance with laws and regulations opinion. So we look at things every year like compliance with certain state statutes, predominantly collateralization of cash accounts. We look at investment policies, those kinds of things that are driven by state statute. If we had identified any issues, we would alert you to those items through this opinion. You can see on page 48 in that first paragraph there, we identified no instances of non-compliance. The next page, then 49, is our third and final opinion, which is our compliance opinion on uniform guidance. We audited 2 programs this year, the Coronavirus Relief Fund and the Child Nutrition Cluster. Through those audits, we identified no internal control issues that we felt we should share with you all tonight. And we also identified no issues of non-compliance with those regulations. Finally, just to wrap up a little bit, we encountered no disagreements with management during the course of our audit. We are not aware of any instances in which your management team reached out to another audit firm looking for a second opinion. We did not discuss any matters with management that we felt might result in a condition to our retention as the district's auditors. And just overall in general, we really had no significant difficulties in dealing with management during our audit. So with that, just maybe a general thank you to Marcy and Kim and the rest of her team, their team, for all of their assistance during the audit. Again, it was kind of another bizarre and unusual year for us. We kind of audited hybrid again with a few days on site and more often than not in our office. And so we really appreciate Marcy and her team, their initial preparedness for the audit, as well as their very timely responses to us during the audit process. So with that, I would be happy to take any questions that you might all have tonight.
Stephanie, this is Ryan Kramer, Superintendent. Just what kind of bearing might these influx of federal funds have on future audits and what we might see in comparability? For board members to really get an idea of truly where we're at when we do have a large increase of federal funds on our horizon and expenditures increasing with that. Is there anything that they should be particularly watchful of as we progress down that use of federal funds or anything along that nature?
Yeah, that's a great question, Superintendent. Thank you. The last couple of years have just been really unusual, as you can imagine, just with the new sources of federal funds. And those always have an interesting effect on the programs that we audit every year. The federal guidelines give us what's called a coverage percentage. So every year that we audit the district, we have to audit a certain dollar amount of your federal expenditures. So the more federal dollars you get means the more programs that we have to audit. So that's one way. Your continued kind of increase in funding could change the number of programs that we audit every year. The other thing is kind of some of the newer pandemic programs, they're going to only be around for a short period of time, but they're kind of unusual in nature in terms of spending, what you can spend them on. The rules are kind of constantly changing for you all in terms of allowable costs, how far back you can go to capture those expenditures. So that's just kind of another interesting and unique factor with some of the federal expenditures that we're auditing in the last couple of years. I do anticipate with the state continuing to provide money in the Esser program that is likely to be another program that we would look at next year. The feds also, through the Office of Management and Budget, the OMB, provide every year guidance to auditors through what's called the compliance supplement. And within that compliance supplement, on occasion, they will identify certain programs as automatically high risk, meaning We don't really get then to use our judgment as auditors as to whether we audit those funds or not. They just say, if they got this money and it's over a certain dollar amount, we need you to audit those. A lot of those programs that are coming out through the Department of Education, pass through the Wyoming Department of Education, they fall into that bucket. So as an example, the education stabilization funds, the various iterations of Esser, if you will, those all kind of fall into that. So that's definitely a program that's on our radar for next year in terms of our audit plan, if you will. Did that answer your question today?
Yes, thank you, Stephanie.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Please.
Another piece that Stephanie did directly mention is the increase in federal dollars that we receive and we expend constitutes additional time of them in the audit field work and typically results in more money spent. So just so the board's prepared for that.
Are there any other questions? With the error that was found in Appendix A related specifically to the inventory, where is this inventory housed? Is it just like, what is that, I guess, exactly?
Mr. Chairman, that's a very good question. That inventory is solely food service inventory.
Okay.
And it was just a discrepancy in the dollar value used on a unit basis.
Right. Any other questions? Thank you very much for your presentation of our audit this year. As always, your professionalism and attention to detail for our district's financial statements, we do appreciate. So.
Thank you very much for having me.
So we will adjourn until 7 p.m. until our regular board meeting will start. Call this meeting to order. Please join me in standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Are there any adjustments to the agenda this evening? I believe there's one adjustment that needs to be made, which would be to
Letter D, I believe.
yes, correct. Letter D, reorganization of the board. We would remove parliamentarian from the slate of officers this evening. The intent with that would be that following discussion would be to fill that with a district representative personnel to help us with that parliamentarian process, who is apart from the board. With that adjustment, are there any others? Okay. Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the agenda with the adjustments?
So
Any second?
second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We'll move forward with letter D, reorganization of the board. Would entertain a motion for the to appoint the superintendent as chairman pro tem.
I move that we appoint Superintendent Kramer as the chairman pro tem.
There's a second.
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. Superintendent.
As chairman pro tem, I open the floor to nominations for Goshen County School Board Chair.
I move that we maintain Zach Miller as current chair.
Okay. Thank you. Trustee Miller has been nominated for the position of board chair. You willing to accept the nomination?
Ma'am.
Are there any further nominations? May I have a second motion to nominate trustee Miller to board chair position? I second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. I would then entertain a motion for the election of vice chairman.
I would like to nominate trustee Sussex.
Is there a second?
Second.
Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, all in favor of appointing trustee Sussex to vice chairman, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. I would then entertain a motion to fill the office of clerk for the Goshen County School District Board of Trustees. Is there a motion? For nomination.
Point of clarification is our current clerk trustee Bullington. Is that
Correct.
I'd like to make a motion to make trustee Bullington our clerk.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, is there a second to appoint trustee Bullington as clerk for the Goshen County School District Board of Trustees?
I second.
All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. And for treasurer, I would entertain nominations for treasurer for the Goshen County School District Board of Trustees.
I move to maintain Carlos Aceto as treasurer.
Right. Are there any other nominations? All right, hearing none, is there a second to appoint Carlos Aceto as treasurer to the Goshen County School, as treasurer for the Goshen County School District Board of Trustees? Second. All right, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
I
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, under item D, number 3, there is we need to designate depositories for the school district's funds. It is recommended that all banks and lending institutions in the county be designated as depositories for the school district funds. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we use all banks and lending institutions in the county be designated as depositories for school funds.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? We don't have any bankers. Okay. Item number 4 then is to set the meeting day and time for the Board of Trustees. It is recommended that we continue to hold meetings on second Tuesday of each month at 7 p.m. year round, with the exception of the July meeting, which would be held prior to the third Wednesday to coordinate the annual budget hearing. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
second.
It's been moved and seconded to hold regular meetings on the second Tuesday of each month at 7 p.m. with the exception of the July meeting held prior to the third Wednesday to coordinate the annual budget hearing. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Next is item number 5, which is board committees for 2022. List. Do you have one of you? Who is currently serving? All right, so we need to nominate and appoint 2 board representatives to the Goshen County WSBA advocacy liaisons. Let me see if I can find the. Apologize. Who is currently serving in those positions? Does you know if you're currently serving? I don't have those. Are there any nominations for to serve for the WSBA advocacy liaisons for the board? I believe Carlos has been our 1 representative. I don't know who the second is.
He was a delegate.
He's a delegate. Okay, so Carlos was delegate under item B. Does anybody have an interest in serving in this capacity as a WSBA advocacy liaison? So this person would advocate for the district in legislative affairs, potentially, if the WSBA asked for such assistance. Hearing none. All right. Is there anybody who would volunteer for this?
I'll volunteer.
All right. Trustee chairs, and I would volunteer as well. So is there a motion to appoint trustee chairs and myself to the board representatives to WSBA advocacy liaison?
So moved.
Okay, Mr. Boynton, is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Thank you. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. So nomination and appointment. Item B then is to nominate and appoint 2 board representatives to Goshen County or to represent Goshen County as WSBA board delegates. I would recommend we nominate trustee Saucedo. Is there another trustee who would like to serve in that capacity?
Trustee Cushman has served as the alternate in previous votes.
Are you comfortable continuing that?
The alternate, sure.
All right, so is there a motion to appoint trustee Saucedo as the delegate and trustee Cushman as the alternate to the board delegates for WSBA?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The next is to nominate and appoint a board representative and alternate to serve on Northeast Wyoming Boces.
Currently, trustee Hager has agreed to serve as the representative, and former trustee Jesperson was the alternate.
Trustee Hager, are you comfortable continuing in that role? And is there anybody who would like to volunteer as alternate?
I would do that.
So is there a motion to appoint trustee Hager as the representative to the Northeast Wyoming Boces and trustee Sussex as the alternate?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Next is to nominate and appoint a board representative and an alternate to serve on Eastern Wyoming Boces.
Currently, trustee Sheik serves as the district representative, and trustee Sussex as the alternate.
Are you both comfortable?
Sure.
Taking those roles? Okay, is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to appoint trustee Schmick as a board representative to, and trustee Sussex as an alternate to serve on Eastern Wyoming Boces. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next is salary relations. I believe myself, trustee Saucedo, and trustee Patrick are currently serving on that in that capacity. Is there anybody who would have interest in serving in that capacity? It's typically 2 meetings a year, a winter and a spring meeting, potentially a third. All right, is there a motion to maintain Mr. Saucedo, Ms. Patrick, and myself as the salary relations representatives?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Next is the building committee representatives appointed by myself. What's that? Oh, there you go. The building committee representatives are currently trustee Schmick and
Trustee Sussex, trustee Cushman, and trustee Saseda.
Okay, I was gonna say, I couldn't remember. I think it's
She's
Schmick
done
and Carlos.
okay,
Yeah.
perfect. You comfortable maintaining that role?
Yep.
We'll just maintain the current build members serving in those capacities. The district advisory council representatives. This is the representatives to DAC, and I don't believe we had representative to DAC.
Correct. This would be new, having this, this meeting takes place at 7 following 7 a.m. the following day after our board meeting. So the second Wednesday morning at 7 a.m. Every month. So the second Wednesday, 7 a.m. here at central office. There is the option to zoom into those meetings too, if you would like to. But this would be a new option for board members, as we've not had their representation on this committee in previous years.
I know that we were invited to one last year, and it was myself and trustee Patrick and
I think trustee Jesperson.
yes, I think that's correct. So,
Would you have interest in maintaining
no, that would be fine.
DAC? Ms. Chairs, would you have interest in serving in that capacity?
Sure.
So Ms.
Who else was at those meetings? I mean, who else was in?
Board members or
No, like,
So in those meetings, we have the district administration and activities directors. Then we also have a representative from the school staff that represents fine arts, and we also have a representative for athletics from a school staff member.
Do you have an interest in serving, trustee Hager?
I would.
Okay. So we would appoint trustee Bullington, trustee Hager, and trustee Chairs to serve in that capacity. Thank you. And then calendar committee, I currently serve on the calendar committee along with
Trustee Bullington.
trustee Bullington. Is there anybody else who would like to serve in that capacity? See no hands flying in the air, we'll maintain trustee Bullington and myself. All right. We'll move to information and proposals then. Did Ms. Patrick contact you related to a presentation this evening? Awesome. Very good. Well, we'll turn the time over to you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I've had the great opportunity of serving as a student representative this past year to the Board of Trustees. And Trustee Patrick emailed us representatives a few days ago to ask about giving some remarks about our experiences as representatives. And I just wanted to take the time and to reflect on the past few months of my service. And I would just say overall, it's been an absolute amazing experience and a phenomenal opportunity that I'm so glad that I actually applied last year around this time. Funny thing was I was the only one in my class that applied, but I was super stoked to be interviewed and go through that entire process and to be able to be here the past couple months and offer my ideas to all of you. And I appreciate every single one of you that's also listened. I would say, to sum it up, my biggest thing that I've learned this past year is I've had a paradigm shift. When I first came as a representative, I was absolutely clueless of what I was going to be doing. However, in the past few months, I've realized that the board does way more than I originally thought. As a student, I always thought that you just had these super important meetings to make executive decisions. However, sitting through the meetings the past couple months, I've realized that staff at my school, administrators, and the Board of Trustees truly care for the students in our community and are trying to change. And I just want to say, I hope that you all continue to change and evolve our school district for all future generations of students. So my next question, are there any things that you wish the board would have asked you to do as a student representative? And my number one concern was just to ask more questions to student representatives. I feel as though parents and people in older generations are kind of disconnected from younger students at times. I think can be obvious. So feel free to utilize student representatives. We're here to help you and offer our opinion. And we see things at school that staff and adults do not see. My other idea is a consideration and suggestion is some of the topics that we discussed this past year. I felt it would have been a huge benefit to bring some of my peers in school to come speak here at these events. And this is just an idea I've had, and you would have to deliberate that. However, at times I feel that maybe I was not in the correct position to discuss some things as I'm not involved in certain activities. My next question, should student representatives be asked to be more active in the future? And I would say simply yes. Even though we're all super busy throughout the year, and there's been times I've not been able to come to meetings due to other activities, I would say any future student representative should have more opportunities to offer their opinion or whatever the board thinks is necessary. My next question, are there changes in the entire program that you feel should be made? Overall, I think communication can be improved upon, but that's something that's always an issue, especially with technology, emails can be lost. However, just better communication in the future. Like I said before, everyone is super busy. I didn't overall like the acceptance of the trustees being understanding that us representatives have activities outside of school. There's been times I've come to board meetings and I've been doing homework on my laptop because I've been enrolled as a full-time college student and a full-time high school student. So as a representative, I truly appreciate that you were understanding while I was here at meetings or even when I was gone. And my other thought is I know this has been a pilot program for the past years. I just ask they continue it on in the future for any future students who would like to participate. So board, thank you for allowing me to serve this past year, and the things I've learned, I will take on into the next chapter in my life. So thank you very much.
Thank you for those comments. And Trustee Patrick and I were discussing exactly your concern about how to improve that communication. So we will have further discussion around that. We will need to hold interviews in January. We typically would have held them in December, but due to a number of extenuating circumstances, we weren't able to do those. So we'll look towards those in January with our district administrators, identifying those students at that time. So with that, we will move forward with our discussion around informational proposals around standards-based grading and the update by district administrators. I just want to make a point of information prior to their presentation that if there's any members of the public who are with us this evening that wish to speak, if you could just please fill out your sheet and turn it into myself this evening, that would be appreciated. With that, we'll turn it over to the district administration.
Members of the board, thank you for inviting secondary administrators to your meeting this evening. We have a brief update on standards-based grading as it relates in the secondary school environment. So again, thank you. And as many of you know, standards-based grading was researched by a district committee for a number of years, probably up to a decade ago. A district committee of teachers, administrators, central office staff, research standards-based grading. That kind of came to a standstill for various reasons. A couple years later, Torrington Middle School did go ahead and pilot standards-based grading at the secondary environment. And then last year, all secondary schools in Goshen County School District adopted the standards-based grading and reporting across the district. I think if we go back to last January, many of the board members here this evening were part of a board work session where we sat here, we solicited teacher input. We solicited input from students. We made a couple revisions to the process at the secondary level, and we moved forward. And so now we're in our second full year of implementation of standards grading. And for the most part, the process itself, I believe, is working. Are there questions that parents have? Absolutely. Are there questions that students have? Yes. Why? simply because it's a cultural change. It's a significant change in the practice of grading and reporting student learning from what we've done ever before. But I think there's three main reasons that I'd like to share with you before I turn it over to the other secondary principals. There's three reasons why, in my mind, secondary or standards-based grading and reporting makes sense. And first off, number one, there we go. It supports our beliefs. It supports our belief that all kids can learn at high levels. And standards-based grading not only states that all kids can learn at that level, but it identifies within the structure of the learning what that looks like. It's not a % correct response. It's clearly identified learning standards that students can meet. And more importantly, if we're not here for all kids, then I guess we need to identify the kids that some of us wish to leave behind. The second main reason that standard-based grading and reporting makes sense to me is it supports our work in the PLC process. We adopted the PLC process again, probably about 10 years ago in this district. And the PLC process has really brought us to a focus of learning as opposed to a focus of teaching. And those are two separate actions. And I hear teachers in my building today talk about the fact that I no longer care about grades. I care about a student's learning, where they're at in the learning, and whether they have demonstrated the proficiency or mastery of the learning targets that we have established. And that brings me to the third point, and probably most importantly, and that is the blood, sweat, and tears that every one of our teachers in the district is currently putting into the collegial process. We have 44 teams in the district comprised of different grade levels, content areas that have worked over the past few years to answer four main questions. And those questions are, what do we want our students to know, understand, and be able to do? And in response to that, our teams have developed a guaranteed and viable curriculum, a curriculum that identifies those priority standards that are important for every student to learn. The second question that we focus on is, how will we know if the students have learned that material? These same teacher teams have worked over the years to develop a district assessment system that includes teacher assessment, formative assessment. Formative assessment is what we would refer to as quizzes in the classroom, or short, brief activities that a teacher would do to gauge where a student is at in their learning. Those things used to be put in the grade book as grades. Now we provide feedback to students about where they're at in their learning. Later in the learning, they will have opportunity to complete common assessments and even a common assessment retake. And if a student still hasn't learned it by the end of the grading term, we're going to give them yet one more opportunity at the end of each semester to demonstrate that scope of learning that we ask them to demonstrate during the semester. Finally, the last two questions, because we have students that simply do not learn at the same rate as their peers. What do we do when students do not learn? We provide intervention. We provide support. We take it to our PLC teams for consideration, our building problem solving teams tackle those questions. As a teacher 30 years ago, I used to put a D or an F in the grade book and go on. I taught it. They didn't learn it. Oh, well. That's not our mentality anymore. And finally, how will we extend the learning for students who are already proficient? I'll be the first to admit this is an area that we still have room for growth, but we are providing opportunities for enrichment, dual and concurrent enrollment. Our career tech programs are offering certification tracks and programs that have never been offered before, and we will continue to grow and expand in that fourth PLC question. Other administrators tonight are going to talk about what standards-based grading looks like in PowerSchool, respond to some of the parent-teacher and student concerns that we have, and also share some of the literature around standards-based grading.
Thank you, Mr. Epler. I think Mr. Epler did a terrific job of addressing the why of standards-based grading in Goshen County School District. I've got the opportunity to address mechanics and really hit at the how. This works in Power School right now, and I would guess that this has been the majority of conversation we've had with parents, with students, and others that are concerned around the way that grades end up reported or learning is measured. Had a terrific opportunity a couple weeks ago, sat down with a parent and a student, and I was walking through the presentation basically that I'll give tonight around what a grade book looks like and how grades are determined. And I was into this by about 30 or 45 seconds, and the student took over and walked through the entire explanation to that student's parent. And we had met because there was a concern about a grade in the class, and I left that meeting really thinking, the students got it. And that conversation could have taken place at home. I was glad to be in the room to watch it happen, because this is the progression of us understanding where we're going with the learning here. And if our students are able to understand where their learning is, that's what we want the system to do, and that's how we want it to work. So this one's kind of first page. Once you click in Power School on a student's grade, it's going to dig into the assignments that they've been assigned. I'm going to ask Mr. Kramer to do his best Vanna White impression here. We can take a look down where the asterisks show up. Where the asterisks are up and down, they're in orange, and these are an indication of whether or not a teacher is using that assignment to count toward a student's final grade. So Mr. Epler talked about some formative assessments and things that happen in the classroom that we definitely want to be giving feedback on, but may not be something that's going to be counted toward a student's final grade. You'll see in this teacher's grade book that there are a couple teacher assessments, but for the most part, we're looking at formative assessments in the form of labs and common assessments that are taking place in that classroom that count toward the student's grade. A couple other things to take a look at on this slide. Exclamation points a little to the left of the asterisks. These are indicating late assignments. And one of the big things is we want our students to be able to definitely continue to do the learning, but we do use missing and late to indicate where those things are. Green check marks to the further left indicate that a assignment has been collected and that it's in the grade book. Okay. The blue drop-down menu next to the green check mark indicates that there are standards assigned to that assignment. And this is where we can really dig in to see where learning is occurring, right? We can click on the standard and see what exactly was the learning that took place with that assignment. Go ahead and flip slides for me, please. This is taking a deeper look at one of the assignments that was in that grade book, Common Assessment 2 for this student. And on Common Assessment 2, there were 4 success criteria that were assessed. So it might have been a test, could have been a lab, could have been in an English class, a paper, any form of an assessment that would be common across the district. This one happens to be assessing these 4 success criteria. And we can see that this student did extremely well on 3 of the 4 success criteria. They didn't do as well on the 4th. And this is the power of standards-based grading and standards-based reporting for us in this district. Because if this would have happened 5 years ago, we would have seen that this student probably scored an 80% on this test, and 80%, maybe we're happy with it, maybe the student's happy with it, maybe the parent's happy with it, and we move on, right? This lets us identify that even though the student did very well on the assessment overall, we've got one area where we need some further learning to take place. And we can dig in with that student and work a little bit further on that specific criteria and come back and reassess so that we ensure that the student makes that learning. Go ahead and switch. This next one is a look at another assignment. This is a lab. As we noticed on that front page, this lab happened to count toward a student's final grade. Okay. This student has a letter grade, okay, that is probably quite a bit lower than that student would like, that their parent would like. Okay. It's not because of the common assessment. This lab, we can see that there are zeros down the line. Okay. We also see that the indicator, the clock indicator is up there, which means that this is late. The student didn't do the lab. And we've had a lot of attendance issues through the fall. Sometimes students come in and make that stuff up. This one's kind of waiting on that, right? And we dug into this. I think we pulled it out of grade book maybe 4 weeks ago. I sent it to Mr. Kramer. I would hope at this point this one's been made up, but this happens too, and where we're using zeros to indicate evidence of no learning or a lack of evidence that shows learning, which pretty much the only way we get there is to not have done it. Go ahead and switch. This is a teacher assessment assigned in the class. And if we would have paid attention on that front page, this one is not marked as counting toward a student's grade. Right? We've got that exempt mark on there, the asterisk up on the right-hand side. Okay. The student scored a 4. This one happens to be, we saw in Common Assessment 2, that top success criteria is a success criteria that on the Common Assessment, the student scored a 1. Earlier, when they turned in this quiz, they scored a 4. So this is a place where the teacher is seeing varying information in terms of that student's learning. We saw in the classroom, the student knew what they were doing. We got to the assessment, they didn't show that. Okay? Probably shows us an indication. It's going to be a pretty easy remediation process. Maybe we need to just check with that student on how things were going that day with that one piece. But the student has demonstrated learning. This also provides a teacher an opportunity when we get to the end of a semester. Even though we didn't count this as a grade at the time, it provides us the opportunity to use our professional judgment and say, I know the student learned that. They showed me they learned it. They just missed that common assessment that day. Okay? And they can go ahead and make that change if they feel it necessary. Go ahead and switch. This one is a little bit more of a full grade book. So far, we've been looking at one student, and this is a look from what teachers see. And teachers can see, and across the columns, you'll see the first column of numbers is a standard. And so far, we've been talking success criteria. Columns 2 and 3 are success criteria. Column 4 is a standard, and column 5 is success criteria. You can see that in the teacher's grade book. It's notated at the top of the column. There's a little star icon with an arrow pointing. That one is a standard. The way the Power School works is that teachers enter in scores on success criteria for students, as we've walked through with the assignments and quizzes and tests that have led up to this slide. The standard is calculated by Power School. So as we go through the semester, these success criteria that show up in columns 2 and 3 are going to be averaged across to give us a score for the standard with which they're associated. Once we have a score for that standard, we're going to add on some other standards and layer throughout the semester. The standard scores, columns 1 and 4, are going to then be averaged, and that score is going to be compared to a rubric, a leveling chart that assigns a letter grade. Probably the best one we can see is 2.5, 2.5, 2.5. 2.5 is a C. Once we get to the 3.01 mark, it's a B. 3.51 mark is an A. Let's switch. This is back to looking at a screen available to one student, and something that we're really asking teachers to dig into as we get to the end of the semester. This has got a lot of information on it for our teachers. It has in this right-hand column, it shows us the number of assignments that we've attached to a success criteria for that, for all students across the semester. I've asked teachers, and I think we've all asked teachers, if this number is below 3, we really need to be looking at, have we given a student a fair assessment of their learning? Right? Have we given them enough opportunities to demonstrate where they're at on the success criteria? Each of these should go up at least by 1 as we see finals toward the end of the semester. And again, looking at one student, we look down column 1 in the numbers there. We can see almost immediately where the student needs to focus their attention as they study for a final, where they might need to visit with a teacher around it, where they need to remediate. The learning that needs to take place now between today and when they come back and test after Christmas, or for some classes possibly later this week. Right? This is a terrific tool students can use to study. It shows us where we haven't demonstrated learning so far and where we need to put the work in. Let's switch. Okay. This one's just an indication of one more feature of the grading as it works within PowerSchool as we created it. It shows, as we look down the second column of numbers, the one with the most numbers in it. This has had many measures across the semester for this individual success criteria, and we can see that a student scored a 2 and a 3 and a 4. The ones in purple, you may or may not be able to see that there are some in purple. They're also italicized, but the ones in purple and italicized are set in the grade book to not count toward the final grade. This is a place a teacher can come at the end of the semester, and at the top of that column, we can see that the student has right now earned a 3 on that success criteria, because PowerSchool is geared toward whichever assignments are counting toward their final grade. We're going to grab the best number that's in that column and put it up at the top, and that's the one that counts. So if we have 5 measures, a student scores a 1, 1, 1, 1, and a 4, we're going to grab the 4 because we care about what they learned, not when they learned it. This is also a terrific place. We see a couple 4s in that column where there are assignments that aren't counting toward the final grade, but that student demonstrated twice that they learned that content at a 4 level. It's a place where the teacher at the end of the semester can come back and look and say, I see 2 4s here, but the student's got a 3 up at the top. Maybe I should think about putting that one up to a 3.5. Maybe I should think about putting that one up to a 4. Right? Not taking professional judgment away from our teachers. Making a system that's easy for our teachers to use, but they still have every right and should be going back through that to make sure that students are earning a fair grade. Last one. This is data that was shared, I think, last February, could have been later last spring. We shared across all 3 schools at the high school level a comparison of grades. And I've been looking at this same data the last couple of days for this semester. It's not that great a measure for where we're at this semester, although numbers don't look too poor right now either. As we continue to finish out this week and next after break, I think we'll see the percentages in A's and B's, which are letter grades that indicate a student has met proficiency, start to move up. Like as students have come back in and taken their finals and taken the opportunity to show proficiency one more time. This does compare, though, looking at 2020 back to the few years before it. The percentages of grades that were in various different levels. So Mr. Heyman's going to share with you a few things. I guess we've got Southeast Stat on the next slide, and then Mr. Heyman's going to visit with you about 15 grade fixes. Thank you.
When we first began to examine the concept of standards-based grading, we started with trying to obtain or ascertain the conceptual basis of what we're doing, the big picture, because we can get lost in specifics if we don't know the bottom line. And so our district was fortunate. We brought in national experts to guide us as we consider what are the fundamental concepts for standards-based grading. One of the people that came in was Ken O'Connor, and you'll see his name at the top of this slide. He's a national expert on grading and student learning. We also brought in Thomas Gusky from the University of Kentucky. So we brought in big-time people. It wasn't somebody's wild idea. It was what's happening nationally, what's research-based, and what's best practice for our students. So Ken O'Connor proposes 15 fixes for grading that's been very traditional. And I'm not going to cover 15 fixes because it would take too long, but I'd like to highlight 4 of them. If you look at number 1, number 1 talks about separating achievement from behavior. And so I'm going to go back to the days of my youth during the Lincoln administration. And when I was in school, you got a report card in an envelope. And you took the report card out and you opened it, and there were 2 sides to it. And if you remember the 2 sides, one was your grades consisted of your grades. The other side was called citizenship. And I went to a school that used a different word. They called it deportment. And I'm still not sure what deportment is, but it was citizenship. So how did Marv behave in class? What was his work ethic? That sort of thing. Both of those are extremely important because when you think of the real world, which side is going to make the greatest difference? It may be the right side. It may be the work ethic side. Somebody that comes to work on time, does a great job, gives their best effort. That's what we're asking of students on a daily basis. The academics are also important because they're the key to obtaining whatever your job is. So when you look at your child's report card at the secondary level, there are two sides, there are two parts to the report card. One is, how did your child do academically? The other side is, how did your child do in terms of, in our school, for example, it's respect and responsibility. At Torrington Middle School, and it's the same at other schools, the teachers also evaluate students in terms of things like their work ethic, their behavior in class. For parents, that's extremely important because we know students need both. They need to achieve at a high level, but they need to be a respectful, responsible citizen. So we do separate that. We do not include things like attendance, behavior, et cetera, in the grade. Because I can remember days not too many years ago when if a student misbehaved in class, their grade went down, which is unfair in the sense that that does not represent what they learned. It represents how they behave. And we have an obligation to report both, but not together. So they're separated. Number two is how to handle late work. One of the concerns of parents that I've heard is if homework doesn't count, then why would they do the homework? Pretty fair question. And I can tell you that teachers know, and you know, and we know, and kids know, if they'll admit it, that you need to do the work to be prepared for the common assessment. If you don't do the work, you're not ready. You don't have a foundation in your learning. So every school in the county at the secondary level has a vehicle to say to students, if the consequence of not doing your work is doing your work. It's not an option just to blow off the work and say, well, I did well on the test. So we track that at Torrington Middle School, and I know other schools do too. This week, we have 5 students that are behind on their work in 8th grade, 4 or more assignments. In 6th grade, we have 0. In 7th grade, we have 19. So the system we put in place, and I know there's a system at the high schools too, works pretty well. But the bottom line is the consequence for not doing your work is doing your work. There's an old Fram oil commercial, if you remember it. You can pay me now or pay me later. Remember that? And that's the message that we give to kids. Do it now or do it later. I'd like to move you to fix 13. Formative and summative assessment. And this has been alluded to previously by both presenters. Formative assessments are quizzes. In the old days, before these fixes, quizzes counted toward your grade. So if Marv Heyman on the first quiz got a 10% and the second one was a 50 and the test was 100, we averaged those numbers together and I'd have a very poor grade. We don't do that anymore. What we look for is where did Marv or your child end up? If they ended up, as Mr. Christensen said, with a 4, they're going to receive a 4. Practice does not count. Practice should not be graded. One of the things that's in here that we're not going to talk about tonight, but it goes back to Mr. Epler's presentation. Dufour's 4th question was, what do we do with the kids that already know it? I think an interesting question is, if we give a pre-assessment at the beginning of a unit and the student knows everything, then what? Or if the student learns it during the unit, well, then what? So we do not include practice in a student's final grade. Fix 14 is learning over time. Again, just to reemphasize, where you end up is what your grade is going to be. But it's extremely important that we have a foundation for what we're doing. So I think this document is critically important. This is what we spent several years talking about. We didn't delve into how we're going to grade, how we're going to do this, how we're going to do that. We started with conceptually, what's this all about? You can examine the other 11 fixes for yourself if you choose to. I think they're all pretty self-explanatory and extremely important. So that's a little bit about the foundation and where we started and what guides our work at this point. Thank you.
Wrap things up tonight. Got a couple articles. Yes, actually, I think they're technically blogs, but I technically don't know the difference. So we're going to call them articles. And they're very brief. We're not going to go over them. There's a very interesting one, the last one, about a first-year teacher reflecting on grading. And I think you'll find that to be very informational. But I did include the 4 PLC questions on the very front of this and highlighted the second one. How will we know they learned it? How we've got to know what specifically we're intervening on. And the standard based grading and the theory behind that allows us to do that. So as you're reading through these articles, when you get time, think about that. Think about the learning of the students, not what we're teaching. How are the students learning and how well are they doing that? And I think when you reflect on it that way, I think it'll put it in an interesting perspective as you think about it through standards-based grading. And with that, any questions you may have?
Any questions? Thank you very much for your time this evening. It was very informative and I think it gives a very good update. I appreciate it. So just to be clear, I do have one question for you, Mr. Christensen. Related to the grade book, if we have parents approach, the mobile device looks very different from what you presented, correct? And that is the online version of it, like a desktop version.
Yeah, about half the slides that I had shown were accessible through the portal for a parent and a student. And some of them were within a teacher's side of the gradebook, the ones that had multiple names on them. But both were accessed through a computer. Accessing from the mobile side has less information.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think we certainly appreciate you guys having us. We've got a lot of students playing music and we're going to go watch it.
Excellent. All right, we will move forward then with our agenda with public forum. All right, we'll start with Mr. Bob Peterson this evening.
Thank you. This is on. Okay. My name is Bob Peterson. Thank you for letting me talk. I had a couple questions here on the budget audit and also the 1920 and the 2021 budgets. I'm making my formal request for copies of those, hard copies, not a computer. I don't have a computer. I don't have a printer. I will pay a reasonable cost for those to be printed, so be it. But I'm making this pretty much a verbal Freedom of Information Act. I want that information. I can't make notes on the computer. I want to look at a hard copy. That's the number one thing I'm interested in. I was very refreshed to see that you're going to continue the board training in January. You know, when you had the workshop a couple of months ago. That's very important for the board, so that the board can kind of continue to work together towards one goal. And the one goal is the only thing that the building, the teachers, and the staff are to do is to provide education, not indoctrination. And the indoctrination part bothers me a great deal. We don't need a political agenda running schools. That needs to be taken clear out. But other than that, I'll be quiet till after the first year, but I look forward to someone calling me, giving me those copies of those budgets. I'd like to look them over. And I would like the budget audit just as it's printed for the school board members. I want the same number of pages and so forth. And I want to wish every one of you a very Merry Christmas. and a Happy New Year. Thank you.
Thank you. Caitlin Flanagan.
My name is Caitlin Flanagan, and I am a 2021 graduate of Torrington High School. Some of you may remember me as I was one of the 5 to advocate for a special classmate and friend to have a cap and gown in a chair at graduation. The group of 5 were promised by current administration to include our friend in a special way at graduation, plus representation in the yearbook. Yet that did not happen. What happened was traumatic. It was heartbreaking, and it was an eye-opener to those who chose to hurt us intentionally for a personal gain. We were told that graduation was not about the seniors or our wishes. And we had many parents stand with us for how we wanted to include our friend, a friend that we shared our childhood with. You can have smooth talkers, you can have someone promised the world, but their actions speak the loudest. We do not need to hash out everything again, but you should know with the decision you make to have the people in this room who are in charge let the entire student body down. No matter what you know about the situation, it was handled wrong. We had a chance to change our school for the better, but you and the admin team failed. For those of you on the board that were not here for this situation, I beg that you ask questions. I challenge you to make an informed decision, get the information you need before you decide. We may look like children to you, but in our experiences, we have grown in a way that no one else should ever be involved in.
Thank you. Mr. Joshua Kruger.
Thank you for your time. As many of you know, for the last several months, I've been opposed to standards-based grading. Now, there has been some improvements this year, but I will let you know. I mean, we heard a lot of great stuff from people that just presented. That is not the way as a parent. I've been at parent-teacher conferences with several teachers. It is not implemented the same from teacher to teacher. And they don't know how to implement it. Some do one way, some do another. We heard a comment that grading doesn't matter. I have a senior. Grading matters. Scholarships matter. Learning matters, but so does the grading, because the nation looks at this. I had a middle schooler that had an opportunity to go to the Naval Academy for STEM camp. They wanted to know what her rating was within the school. Guess what? That stuff comes from grading. We need to also emphasize grading. When the teachers implement it, some, like I said, do it one way, some do it another. A lot of times at the beginning of a semester, there's a common test. Some teachers decide you cannot get a 4 on that common test. The highest your group gets maybe a 2, 2.5. How is that saying, like we've heard from some of the presenters, that it gives them an opportunity to prove that they know everything that's going to be taught? It doesn't. Because the way it is that they take the highest number and that's it. Some of the teachers are afraid to give those high numbers at the beginning because they can't take them back. I think some of this should be looked at as a cumulative. That's how a lot of colleges and the rest of the world looks at things. So we are training our kids right now that you do it this way, but when you go into college, it's done a completely different way. You can take retake after retake, which is good for learning, but it is not the way that the rest of the world works. And how are we preparing? So I would highly recommend each board member to talk to other parents, find out from parents, how has this grading system affected your kids? Has it been poorly? Did you have A students that dropped down to B or C's and because it's not reflected? Talk to teachers. I've talked to several, some are for it. I've talked to several that are against it. And I can see that some of those teachers probably don't feel open to go talk to administration because they're employed by this district. But if they're truthful, I think you guys should actually reach out and talk to them. That's something I've been talking for the last several months on, is that this standard-based grading system needs to be revamped. I'm glad to hear that you guys are hearing some of it, but I heard a lot of positive, and I think you guys need to look out and reach out into the community and see what the real role is, besides just what the administration and the people pushing this is doing. So thank you very much, and have a great week.
Thank you. Ms. Rebecca Coburn.
Good evening, board members. I too have a comment about the standards based grade system. One of the presenters here said that each teacher has the possibility of looking at the grades and saying, well, it's a 4, it's a 2, 1, we'll just think of it as. Well, that's great. That's great if your teacher likes that student and decides to give them a higher grade, but we all know that there are personality conflicts in this world, and if you happen to be on the wrong side of that personality conflict between you and your teacher or your student and that teacher, your student could seriously suffer because, yeah, he may have known it, but I don't like him, so I'm not going to give him that one. And that's a possibility you have to look at, and you have to make some safeguards against that. Number 2, I would like to discuss the date and time for the meetings. I love that it's the same time, the same month, same time and same day every single month. That's great. But I would ask the board to look at the calendar and the scheduling of events. Tonight, there are several music opportunities. There's often sports things that parents have to decide which one they're going to attend. And many parents are going to choose their children over the school board when they really would like to be at both. Is it possible to not schedule those types of events on board meeting nights? Also, I have heard of students saying that they would like to attend this and have asked their coach to be released at least on time. And because the coach found out they wanted to go to the board meeting, they were held longer, so they could not attend the board meeting. I think a word needs to be said that if the student chooses to attend the board meeting, that is their constitutional right as a public citizen to attend a board meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Marie Flanagan.
Good evening. And I am one of those parents. That's why I was late. I was at the choir concert that was attended by pretty much everyone in Goshen County. And it was wonderful. I'm sorry you guys couldn't attend. But there is something that we definitely do need to discuss. Well, I can't discuss with you here and now, but I think it's something that we need to really bring light to. As you know, again, my daughter was diagnosed with a very rare form of mononucleosis that was affected by Hashimoto's. We found out she had a medical concussion that is very rare and odd. It happened in the school. Now, she was put on a 504. The 504 process is broken. And when I mean this, I'm coming to you as an open-hearted parent with the 504. 504s are designed to have the best interest of the student at heart with the needs of that specific student. And it's also designed so that teachers are fully aware of exactly what's going on with that specific student. If those teachers don't know, then unfortunately, that's put back onto the district. I don't want to see that. I want to see the best interest of the student, while the teacher also is given their optimal information for that student. We have a serious breakdown. I was given a piece of paper with teachers' names on it saying that these teachers had a 504 meeting with my daughter, or about my daughter. You can't do that. You cannot do that. And then we had a separate meeting for my husband and I, principal, my daughter, and she put down she was the social worker, but Ms. Ogburn. Ms. Ogburn does a great deal to help.
Can you refrain from district staff?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh my gosh,
Thank you.
I'm so sorry about that. Yes, I'm so sorry. So our counselor, so sorry about that. But we've had great success with our counselor. Unfortunately, my daughter has teachers that are not on the list. And she is failing because she doesn't show up to class. Well, that's per the 504 and the teacher doesn't care. How's the teacher supposed to know if she was not given the information? How are we supposed to succeed? My daughter's a senior. She doesn't get a redo. She literally has to take every single hour of the day because she lost so much her sophomore year. You guys, we've got to get this handled. The 504s and the communication are really lacking. And she is looking at having to drop this class, which is, that's the worst thing I could ever hear as a parent. On the standards-based grading, dude, you got some problems. What they're telling you is a bunch of pretty happy sunshine and rainbows. That is not what's happening. What Josh was saying, yes, you're right. Some teachers are giving and saying, you can only make it 2. Well, then that means you can only make a C. Even though you got 100%, you can only make a C. So you did everything that you were asked. You learned everything you were supposed to learn, and you can only make a C. You can't get an A. We're set up to fail. So we have some serious issues. So please, I really hope you guys start asking parents questions. With the 504s, that's treading in some waters. That's not a good place to be treading. So otherwise, you guys, thank you and have a great Christmas.
Thank you. Thanks to all of those that participated in public forum this evening. We'll work with Mr. Kramer to respond to your various requests over the coming weeks. Next, we'll move to item G, which is recommended actions, and 1, the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I would move to approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? One of our trustees who's not able to make it this evening did have a question about the IRS item D on the consent agenda, which is the driving 27 adjusted miles per school day in one direction, and sorry, item E, the 110 miles. There was some question about that. Does that student reside in our district? Was their main question.
Yes, they actually reside about 28.6 miles from the nearest bus stop. So they are on the very far corner of our district. And that is also when you have those miles, it actually to and from. So that's kind of where that mileage might be a little bit confusing there.
Right, thank you. Any further discussion on the consent agenda? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Consent agenda is approved. Item 2, new business. Item A of new business is consider the approval of the 2020-2021 district financial audit. The audit was presented to us this evening in a work session prior to the board meeting. It's recommended that we approve the 2020-2021 district financial audit as presented. Is there a motion?
I move that we approve the 2020-2021 district financial audit as presented.
For a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair, may I share exactly where that will be posted following the board's approval tomorrow on the school website?
Please.
So when you go to the school website, I'm just going to go from the homepage. You'll notice district offices up here at the top, drop down menu to the business office. Then click on the business office, scroll down to business office forms. You'll see all previous years' budgets and audited financial statements, and that information can be found on the school website for those that would request. Also, requests can be made for a paper copy if a person so desires.
Thank you. I would just like to make a comment that in appreciation for our district business manager and her work in preparing a budget and commend her on the work that the audit did find an unmodified opinion on the audit this year. That our financial statements are true and correct. So with that, any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the district financial audit as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Item B is to consider approval of offering an employment agreement to Jodi Mendez as a district social worker for the remainder of the 2021-2022 school year. Is there a motion?
I move to approve an offering of an employment agreement to Jodi Mendez.
Second.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Sorry, there's just a point of clarification. Without Lorene, we are a little slow this evening on our first motion there around the district financial audit. Who was the made the motion?
Seth.
Thank you.
And who was the second? Schmidt. Thank you. All right. Item C then is to consider approval of proposed revisions to the Goshen County School District level close quarantine protocol. Is there a motion?
So moved.
So your motion is to approve the revisions to the district protocol?
Correct.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, any discussion?
I have just a few things. Just on this last protocol that we have implemented. First, I don't want to just make sure this comes across straight as I don't want to disregard anybody's work that was put into this. I know a lot of it was kind of what we had to do at that time. I know we keep trying to move forward here and implement changes that we feel best suits the district. So with that, I don't feel we have ever had a true foundation to start on regarding COVID policy at any level. I think all we do is continue to try to move forward by kind of just throwing stuff at the wall and hoping it sticks. I feel that we need to start from a solid foundation of truth and honesty. And whatever that takes, I think we should search for that. In my opinion, the solid foundation in any school district is the students and employees of the district within our four walls. Administration, everybody included. So until I can't support any COVID policy protocol until I hear concrete data on the people within our four walls, give them a vote. That's what I need. I need a vote from every student, at least giving them an option to vote on whether or not they feel they want us as a board to implement this COVID policy.
Just a,
So.
oh, sorry.
No, sorry.
Oh, no.
I don't know where exactly this goes. I just thought I would like to table this until we would at least offer a vote to our district. All the current members in our district, including the students, on whether or not we, as a board, have the authority to implement a COVID policy that doesn't come down from the county, state, or federal level.
Any other discussion?
I'm not that I'm disagreeing with Trustee Hager. My only question is, isn't this just, this would not remove, if we didn't accept this, this would not remove the policy. It's basically just rewording some pieces, correct?
Correct. The changes this evening are making editorial changes and clarifications. Those that were available that evening. So Trustee Chairs, Cushman, Sussex, and myself worked on this along with our school nurses and Dr. Harris of the state, with the state health department on these changes that are recommended this evening. So the motion on the table is to accept the revisions this evening to the protocol.
So that said, not that I necessarily think that we need a COVID stance per se moving forward. In that respect, I kind of agree with Trustee Hager, but I do think it would be wise to accept this just because I think for the time being, we're going, since that's not an agenda item, we're going to have this policy in place until the next board meeting regardless. And so I think that we should accept this because according to the committee, this would be the best way forward. So.
Any further discussion?
So in that committee meeting, we talked about everything's changing. Essentially, we're gonna maybe go ahead and do something about this again. I don't know, next month. What was the plan there?
I think that
don't have.
Correct. So we didn't set the next meeting. Essentially, that this is the close contract quarantine protocol from that meeting that was discussed. Minus this protocol, we go back to the state's current guidelines, which various counties have instituted in their individual ways. So this is by the original intent of this was to allow students to wear a mask if they're exposed versus quarantine at home, which had been the prior direction of the state and the county health officials.
So point of clarification, actually, if the board would not vote these revisions through, then the existing
policy
would stay in place, not the state.
Correct.
But
Yes, if these are not voted in today,
the changes that would not take place, the policy would still be in effect.
Is there any further discussion on the motion to accept the policy as presented this evening? The revisions. Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the proposed revisions to Goshen County School District number 1 school level close contact quarantine protocol as presented, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. I think there is opportunity for us to come back and revisit this, trustee Hager, so I appreciate your comments this evening. And so we will have to, I think under our next meetings, we can have some further discussion on what that might look like. Letter D then is approval of reinstating district policy 5113. It's recommended that we approve reinstatement of all requirements of district policy 5113 student attendance effective January 12th, 2022. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
So I have a really hard time with this one, and especially in light of, and I know that there's room for us to delineate and use our judgment calls as far as attendance on these for the students. But in lieu of our quarantine protocols and everything else, I think this is premature. And if it was in between school years, I could see it, but in between semesters, I have a really hard time with this one. That's just fine.
Mr. Kramer, do you have any information of why this request is being made?
So I'll probably reference it a little bit more later in my reports on attendance. But there is a belief by teachers primarily at the secondary level and at the elementary level. I shouldn't just point to the secondary level. That a number of students, because there are no consequences that exist for non-attendance, that there tends to be a lack of attendance, not due to illness, but due to a desire to not attend school in person. And there is a desire from teachers that I've heard from and administrators to reinstate so that they feel they do have some ability to reinforce some of those consequences for a student's lack of attendance. And I too would agree with Trustee Sussex that this is a challenging one because we do fight the battle every day in regards to having a desire for parents, which is a difficult choice if their student is showing signs and symptoms to not come to school. There is some what I work against this when we enforce and reinforce these consequences. And so I completely understand that hesitation.
Is there any other discussion? My concern with this is similar to Trustee Sussex. After review of the policy, my concern is, although through conversation with you, Mr. Kramer, I believe that we would use our judgment. However, the policy does not state that, and I feel that there could be students, specifically general guidelines have fewer than 10 absences in order to complete a grade level, either in morning or afternoon session. It doesn't really address that in policy, and so that is my concern this evening.
The one piece, if I may,
Please.
Chairman Miller, that there does exist in regards to medical documentation. So if there is a visit to the doctor's office, those are cited as documented absences, not unexcused absences. When I get later to at my information a lot regarding absences in relation to funding questions, documented absences are not a factor in our ADM. Unexcused absences are. And so that determination is pretty stark in contrast, but it does not make your decision any easier, unfortunately.
So is there an opportunity to make some clarifications to the policy between now and the next board meeting, which would document some of that as even recommended this evening? It doesn't go into effect until the day following our next board meeting, because specific, it doesn't say unexcused or undocumented absence under general guidelines. So I think there's some verbiage that the policy committee could potentially use here in order to make those the clarifications.
That would be, yes, the policy committee would be glad to take a look at that.
So there's a motion on the table that has been made to approve this policy. We'll take a vote on that motion, hearing no further discussion. So all those in favor of approving the policy this evening, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by saying aye as well.
Aye.
Motion does not pass this evening. And as stated in discussion, if the policy committee could take a look at that. Item E is consider the approval of contracting with the Public Education and Business Coalition for additional staff development. It's recommended to approve contracting with the PEBC for 3 additional staff development days during 2021-2022 school year, not to exceed $9,000, funded through Title II funds. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Item F, consider approval of new district policy 3409, time distribution records for federal programs on introduction and first reading. It's recommended to approve policy 3409 as presented on introduction and first reading. Is there a motion?
I move that we approve district policy 3409 as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approval of this policy 3409, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Consider approval of proposed revisions, district policy 6145, district activities advisory council on introduction and first reading. It's recommended to approve the revisions to the district policy 6145 as presented on introduction and first reading. Is there a motion?
I move to approve revisions to district policy 6145.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion, sir? We appointed 3 members to this committee, and so we'll appoint those that are present this evening versus Ms. Patrick to be consistent with our policy. Sorry about that. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Item H, consider approval of proposed revisions to district policy 4115, certified staff assignments and voluntary transfers on introduction and first reading. It is recommended to approve the revisions to this policy district 4115 as presented on introduction and first reading. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Policy has been in place a long time. Hearing that none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item I then is to consider approval of contracting with Painting Unlimited for Trout Elementary wall covering projects. It's recommended to approve contracting with Painting Unlimited for the wall covering removal, wall repair, and painting at Trout Elementary in the total amount of $35,840 funded through major maintenance. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Just a question. I can't remember from the building committee, but how much does this leave that isn't done?
That'll be it all.
That's okay.
This covers it.
Okay.
This has been in the works for.
The difficulty with this one is the job itself is not one that is common, because you're taking a fabric wall covering off and then filling in any of the gaps that are existing from that with drywall and those. And so it's finding the right person, right place, the right time, willing to do the work and schedule. And we're very pleased with the business that plans to do it, and feel that it's going to be a nice opportunity there and trail to update some things there.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving contracting with Painting Unlimited for the wall covering removal, wall repair, and painting at Shell Elementary in the total amount of $35,840 funded through major maintenance, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None, motion passes. Item 3 on our agenda this evening is topic for discussion. Any board members with topics that they would like, that are timely, that they would like to discuss this evening? Quiet group. All right, hearing none, we'll move forward to item H, future meetings. There is a work session that is scheduled for Monday, January 24th at 5 p.m. with Dr. Rod Kessler of the WSBA to continue the work on the board self-evaluation process and goal setting. The next regular board meeting will be Tuesday, January 11th at 7 p.m. To your comment earlier, Ms. Cohorn, we have requested that the district refrain from scheduling events on these evenings, and we'll just reiterate that moving forward. So thank you. And then item number 3 is the WSBA will be offering their winter board development workshop on January 29th. So if you're interested in attending that, that is being held at Casper Ramp Coda, please let Lorraine know if you plan to attend. With that, we'll move forward to the superintendent's report.
So a couple of things that I want to just address first, because I think it's really important for clarification purposes. One, during public comment, it was stated that a teacher could go in and just arbitrarily change a grade. That is incorrect. Mr. Christensen, I believe, made the specific statement that these pieces of evidence here that are not part of the grade, but are part of a quiz that is not in the grade would be utilized to use their professional judgment and to make sure the grade accurately depicts what that student's learning is. It would not be something that would just be chosen out of behaviors and chosen out of who a teacher likes. We have professional teachers within this district to use those and have guidance related to that. The other piece with that I think is vitally important also is to, if there is a individual who was denied leaving a practice, I would like that administrator of that building to be notified of that immediately. That casts our coaches, all our coaches in our district, in a negative light. And I do not feel it's fair to any of our coaches unless that is actually factual and documented, and then a specific complaint to a principal at that building. Also move on to some information that I've kind of shared on my weekly radio address in relation to Arp Esser 3 information. Share this. So tomorrow we're going to have a community survey pasted on our website. And this deals with the Arp Esser Fund. So these are the American Rescue Plan Act that was signed into law. And these funds are dedicated for K through 12 schools through the elementary and secondary school education relief. And that's where Esser comes from. This is the third phase of these funds. And in this set, we are eligible to receive $7.1 million in one-time federal funds. The purpose of these funds is to help maintain safe and effective operations in our schools and address the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on learning and students' social and emotional well-being, with at least 20% of these funds used to address learning loss, mental health, and student well-being. So in this survey, because of the importance of gaining community information, we are asking that the respondents identify themselves, and then also if they could have their name or email or however they'd like to be contacted if there's follow-up questions relating to this. There are many different facets related to the ESSER 3 funds. And so one of these areas is addressing opportunity gaps or learning loss. Some of the suggestions in this area are extended day or extended school year programs. What we'd like opinions on is in these certain areas, what do you feel or how would you rank the necessity of addressing that learning gap or learning loss? And then in question 4, then I'd ask specifics. If you have suggestions relating to this item to answer narratively in that section there on how this would be addressed, what are some ideas. This is a open slate. There are some stringent requirements that may eliminate some of those suggestions in this set of federal funds, but that doesn't eliminate them from also other grant opportunities that we may have. And so if it's a great idea, please feel free to share those. So there's a number of questions relating to some of these specific areas: summer school, after school programs, incentivizing the retention of existing staff and the hiring of new staff as directed through the American Recovery Plan to stabilize nationwide workforce, mental health services and supports for staff and students. And then suggestions along with that: indoor air quality in school facilities, the improvement of indoor air quality in school facilities, including updated heating, ventilation, air conditioning systems, possibly adding air filtering purification and other air cleaning equipment. And then there's options for specific school facility repairs and improvements that would reduce the risk of virus transmission and exposure to environmental hazards, additional space to ensure social distancing, or improvements to equipment to improve ability to clean materials. Also, the opportunity to have more staff development to update classroom curriculum and practices. Expanded opportunities for students to engage with workplace, workforce, and business partners, career mentoring apprenticeships, internships, job shadowing, career speakers, and other business partnerships. Expand assistance to high school students for post-high school planning, assist students with exploring options for careers, post-secondary study, college application process, dual and concurrent college course plans. And then finally, providing principals and other school leaders with the resources necessary, necessary to address the needs of their individual schools. And then each one of those items has specific areas for specific suggestions. If you don't have a specific suggestion, that's perfectly all right, but please still rank the necessity of that area. And then if there's other activities that you feel would make an impact on students in Goshen County, we would welcome those suggestions. We will then have a committee of some small group of board members along with a representative body of the school staff reviewing this information and then building a budget for this grant opportunity. The final fiscal budget is due on March 22nd of 2022. It's a rare opportunity to have this type of funds to support the learning within our district. It is an opportunity for us not only to take a look at the ways we're educating students currently and the structures that we have in place, but provides an opportunity to really kind of enlist some new and innovative ways that maybe even following the implementation might become a priority within the district. That might have been one, well, we just couldn't fiscally do it at this time. Now we have the opportunity to check and to see if that is one of the areas in which we feel is vitally important to our district and our students. So that'll be an opportunity tomorrow. That should be on. Also, Mr. Foster was fortunate enough to actually video then this portion too. If there's any additional questions, please feel free to contact the central office. If you are unable to gain access online, we absolutely can print you off a copy and can have that available here at central office for you to submit via paper, and we would then get that to the appropriate committee for consideration. Any questions related to the Arp Esser $3? All right, I referenced earlier regarding enrollment. Let me bring up my next screen. So in this slide here, what I have done is, you'll notice, Neil, this is familiar. You have a paper copy also, board members. This is the average attendance. So average attendance is pretty simple. It is the percentage of students that are registered who come on a daily basis. Then we average that per month. So for instance, in Lingo Fort Laramie, this month, 82.94% of students were in attendance on this month. Last month, there was 87.94%. Color coding means that this, in this column, and letter G means this is a comparison to the previous month. So as you can see, red would indicate it's 5% lower than the previous month. This would also indicate the previous year then, in comparison, this column would give the previous year. So if it's red, it's 5% below what it was the previous year. If it's in this column and it's dark green, it's 5% above. If it's light green, it means it's between 0% and 4.99%. If it's in yellow, it means it's below 0% to negative 4.99. So you can see, if we look at it on a grander scheme, where I look at is more primarily the school total. As you can see from last month, we were a little slightly down, but not significantly. Some of those I look at in relation to if there was a COVID positive indicator on those, if that had any effect. This doesn't necessarily affect the average percent missing because those are documented absences. So quarantine, all those are documented absences, but it might indicate another reason that a student was out. When you get into these lower numbers also, just a couple of students can have a pretty big impact on that percentage. But overall, you can see from the previous year, quite a bit of green, some yellow there also, but very few red, which is a good occurrence in relation to attendance for this last month. Now, when I go into the next document that I will share, this is related more to our funding, and this is the ADM. So this is taking that average percentage, and for instance, if I am a student and I am there every day, all day, I am worth 1.0. If I am a student in high school and I only attend the first 2 periods, out of an 8-period day, I am there 25%. So I am worth then 0.25. And that's why we get these point and half or partials. So what we take and why it's important to monitor this average daily membership on a monthly basis is because at the end of the year, this all gets thrown into a report, and each month we get an average daily membership. And that average daily membership is then attributed to our funding stream. This is different than most states. Other states, you'll probably hear October 10th is count day. So they take one day out of the year, count how many kids are in the seats, and that's what they're funded on. Wyoming does it a little differently. Every day, every student present, averaged up for the entire year is where our funding model represents. And so that's why on a monthly basis, it's important to kind of just monitor that information, because this is a direct reflection of our funding stream and where it will end up. So this column here indicates from the previous year. Sometimes that's not a great comparison. You'll notice the color code, because if I have 19 students here and I compare it to the previous year, well, there were 27 students in that class. So obviously there's a lack of comparison. When we go back and then in this column, the cohort group. So, which is interesting, the previous year, November 2020, the 9th grade, when they were freshmen in 2020, they had an ADM of 19.13 in the month of November. That same cohort group had the exact same attendance rate this month, which is kind of interesting. Then this next column lists last month. And again, 19.13. Now, again, this is kind of interesting, because when we have the 0.13, one thing that I didn't reference, we do have some students that are not taking full schedules. And they might be coming in for a music class. They might be coming in for PE. They might be coming in for some of our extra, and that's where we get these points. So really what we're watching here is this middle column, looking at the cohort groups, asking questions. What is the difference between the previous year? Right here, Lincoln Elementary, that's kind of a red flag. What is the difference here that we had 87 from this cohort group last year, and we have 75? One thing to remember, TK has an impact on that. So our transitional kindergarten program has an impact on those numbers too. The other thing that we have to further investigate is what's going on here with our first grade to second grade numbers, and what's that impact. Then as we come down to this next column, what is interesting also, you'll notice at THS. One thing you'll especially notice, 312 last year, 321. Now, the one piece that we need to remember on THS is the impact of PRS. Primarily, well over 90% of the students in PRS are students that were attending a THS. So 10 students, there were 10 students in enrollment at PRS last year. We have doubled that number this year, which is great. We have students appropriately placed in a program that is meeting their needs. That's a plus rather than a negative when we look at the overall impact of what might have occurred with an ADM. That's also one of the things to watch carefully as we take a look at that attendance piece, and why, what is our impact of unexcused absences when we don't have that policy in place. Maybe it's very minimal, maybe there's a positive correlation. I couldn't give you a number that actually correlates that, but it's always good to monitor that information on a monthly basis and just to watch out for things. Also impacted on this, and that you have to be careful on the correlation, is that average. And how many days are in a month, how many we average it out, how much of one student in one classroom can impact that too. So if you have further questions on that, I'd be glad to answer those. I'm going to move on to our YTOP data. And we're focusing this month on 5th and 6th grade. And if you remember from last month, so 5th grade math in comparison. So what I did here in this first column is, this is how they scored in 2021, 54.6. Then if I go back up here, so 2021, this was the highest of the last 3 years if it's in green. If it's yellow, it was higher than one of the last 2 years that this group took it. If 2021, it was higher than the previous time this group took it. So that's important. And then 2021, it was the lowest of the 3 years. So as I go back to this math, 5th grade math did an excellent job. As you can see, all greens here, continuous improvement. Also above the state average. So this column over here, the state average is 51.2% of students achieved proficiency on the YTOP in math. In Goshen County, 54.6% of our students. In English, this is in the blue. This means that they improved from previous subgroup. This is an area that we're pretty close on though. Unfortunately, we did not exceed the state average, but we were pretty close. That's probably in the neighborhood of about 1 to 2 students that we would need to improve to exceed that state average. 6th grade math, this is an area that we really are focused on. This group is one that this last year in 6th grade does not correlate to where the students had achieved in the past. There's a significant focus right now on our 7th grade in intervening in their math area to really hopefully see some improved growth. As you can see, this was not uncommon across the state. This grade level in particular struggled in comparison to the percentage of students that were identified as proficient. And again, in English language, 6th grade with the area that they did improve, and then they were below the state average. And so this is one area too. The grade level in 7th grade, there's a lot of emphasis at the 7th grade level across the district, which is incorporating much increasing higher standards and increasing the interventions for that grade level to hopefully see increased achievement this spring when we go back to the White Top. That is everything I have for White Top attendance and ESSER 3 information. If anybody have any questions, be glad to answer those.
Is there a specific school where that 6th grade class is lower in the district, or is it seen across the district?
It is lower across the district, but there are certain buildings where it is more significant than others.
Thank you. Any other questions this evening? I felt to discuss the idea, do we need to have a work session to discuss Mr. Hager's concerns about COVID policy, et cetera?
Is there opportunity in that scheduled workshop for?
I would guess probably not on that date, based on the amount of work that will probably have to get accomplished in that time period.
If there's not in that, I've kind of asked you guys before, I would like some time just to have a general broad-based discussion.
It seems like the committee that we had before, that structure has worked well. Could we do that again and maybe put different members on if they have interest in addressing that? Sounds like you guys might have talked about it last time. That's why I bring that up. So maybe doing a committee again.
So I guess the question I would have is it to readdress that specific protocol, or is it to address how we respond to this moving forward in general? And I think, so that would be for you, I guess.
Yeah, probably both. But, I mean, for me, yeah, just how we visualize the future of this moving forward. How can we keep, all 9 or 10 of us on the same page and communicate? Just other avenues to communicate amongst ourselves other than this type of setting, because we can't do it here.
I think the committee idea is a good idea. The only problem I have with that is it's a select few of us, and it would be nice to have input from the whole board on all of this stuff instead of just, having 3 of us or whatever, talk about all this stuff and discuss it. I think it would be a better representation if we could have a work session or something structured in that respect.
So when we look at that, recognizing, I would doubt most are available in the next 2-week period. So do we want to have 2 work sessions in January, or do we want to schedule a work session for this topic in February? That is 60 days out there. It's a ways, in the future.
One other thing I would say to that is there's always the potential that things on the state level or the federal level could change relatively quickly. We don't know, but and it might actually help us in that discussion or in that work session. So I would say if we can push it off to the first part of January, it might be beneficial.
I think in reference to Dr. Harris kind of alluded to that in our conversation about the possibilities and changes at the federal level in regards to endemic versus pandemic policies. So yeah, I would agree.
So would it be appropriate then to have this as a topic for a future meeting at our January 11th board meeting, at which time we would hopefully know if the CDC or the State Department of Health has issued new guidelines and would allow us to then set a work session, whether it's the following week or weeks after that meeting. But feel like a good, seeing some head nods. Okay. So we'll just include that as a topic for a future meeting on our board agenda for January 11th. All right, any other business to come before the board this evening? Hearing none, we'll stand adjourned.